The Hebrew Bible, the 5 books of Moses, Leviticus, chapter 15. And the Lord spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying, Speak to the Israelites, and you shall say to them, Should any man have a flux from his member, he is unclean. And this shall be his uncleanness in his flux, his member running with his flux, or his member stopped up with its flux. This is his uncleanness. Any bedding on which the man with flux lies is unclean, and any object on which he sits is unclean. And a man who touches his bedding shall launder his garments and bathe in water, and shall be unclean until evening. And he who sits on an object that the man with flux has set on shall launder his garments and bathe in water, and shall be unclean until evening. And he who touches the body of the man with flux shall launder his garments and bathe in water, and shall be unclean until evening. And should a man with flux spit upon a clean person, he shall launder his garments and bathe in water, and shall be unclean until evening. And any saddle upon which the man with flux rides shall be unclean. And whoever touches anything that has been under him shall be unclean until evening. And he who carries these things shall launder his garments and bathe in water, and shall be unclean until evening. And anyone the man with flux touches, not having rinsed his hands in water, shall launder his garments and bathe in water, and shall be unclean until evening. An earthen vessel that a man with flux touches shall be broken, and any wooden vessel shall be rinsed with water. And when the man with flux becomes clean from his flux, he shall come out him 7 days for his being clean, and launder his garments and bathe his body in fresh water, and he shall be clean. And on the 8th day he shall take him 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, and come before the Lord at the entrance to the tent of meeting, and give him to the priest. And the priest shall do them, and on a offense offering and 1 burnt offering, and the priest shall atone for him before the Lord for his flux. And when a man has his emission of seed, he shall bathe his whole body in water, and be unclean until evening. And any fabric or any leather upon which there has been an emission of seed shall be laundered in water, and be unclean until evening. And a woman, a man whom a man has bedded with emission of seed, they shall wash in water and be unclean until evening. And a woman who has a flux of blood, her flux being from her genitals, 7 days she shall be in her menstruation, and whoever touches her shall be unclean until evening. And whatever she lies upon in her menstruation shall be unclean, and whatever she sits upon shall be unclean. And whoever touches her bedding shall launder his garments and bathe in water, and shall be unclean until evening. And whoever touches any object which she has set shall launder his garments and bathe in water, and shall be unclean until evening. And if it is on the bedding or on the object that she is sitting on, when he touches it, he shall be unclean until evening. And if a man in fact beds her, her menstruation shall be upon him, he shall be unclean 7 days. And any bedding upon which he lies shall be unclean. And should a woman have a flux of blood many days, not in the time of her menstruation, or should she have a flux in addition to her menstruation, all the days of the flux of her uncleanness she shall be as in the days of her menstruation. She is unclean. Any bedding upon which she lies all the days of her flux shall be like the bedding of her menstruation, and any object on which she sits shall be unclean like the uncleanness of her menstruation. And whoever touches them shall be unclean, and shall launder his garments, and have bathed in water, and shall be unclean until evening. And if she becomes clean from her flux, she shall count her 7 days, and after shall be clean. And on the 8th day she shall take her 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, and bring them to the priest at the entrance to the tent of meeting. And the priest shall do on 1 offense offering and 1 burnt offering, and the priest shall alone atone for her before the Lord for the flux of her uncleanness. And you shall set apart the Israelites from their uncleanness, lest they die through their uncleanness, by making unclean my sanctuary which is in their midst. This is the teaching about a man unclean, about the man with flux, and about him who has an emission of seed by which he becomes unclean, and about her who is unwell in her menstruation, and about the person with flux, whether male or female, and about her man who lies with an unclean woman. Chapter 16. And the Lord spoke to Moses after the death of Aaron's 2 sons, when they came forward before the Lord and died. And the Lord said to Moses, Speak to Aaron, your brother, that he not come at all times into the sacred zone within the curtain in front of the cover that is on the ark, lest he die. For in the cloud I shall appear over the cover. With this shall Aaron come into the sacred zone, with a bull from the herd for an offense offering, and a ram for a burnt offering. A sacred linen tunic he shall wear, and linen breeches shall be on his body, and with a linen sash he shall gird himself, and a linen turban he shall don. They are sacred garments, and he shall bathe his body in water and put them on. And from the community of Israelites he shall take 2 he-goats for an offense offering, and 1 ram for a burnt offering. And Aaron shall bring forward the offense offering bull which is his, and atone for himself and for his household. And he shall take the 2 goats and set them before the Lord at the entrance to the tent of meeting. And he shall put lots on the 2 goats, 1 for the Lord and 1 for Azazel. And Aaron shall bring forward the goat for which the lot for the Lord comes up, and he shall make it an offense offering. And the goat for which the lot for Azazel comes up shall be set live before the Lord to atone upon it, to send it off to Azazel in the wilderness. Then Aaron shall bring forward the offense offering bull which is his. And he shall atone for himself and for his household, and he shall slaughter the offense offering bull which is his. And he shall take a handful of fiery coals from the altar from before the Lord, and a double handful of fine aromatic incense, and bring it within the curtain. And he shall put the incense on the fire before the Lord, and the cloud of incense shall envelope the covering that is over the ark of the covenant, lest he die. And he shall take from the blood of the bull and sprinkle with his finger over the surface of the cover on the east side, and before the curtain he shall sprinkle 7 times from the blood with his finger. And he shall slaughter the offense offering goat, which is the people's, and bring it blood within the curtain, and do with its blood as he did with the blood of the bull, and sprinkle it on the cover and before the cover. And he shall atone over the sacred zone for the uncleanness of the Israelites and for their sins, according to all their offenses, and those he shall do for the tent of meeting that dwells with them in the midst of their uncleanness. And no person shall be in the tent of meeting when he comes into the sacred zone to atone until he goes out. And he shall atone for himself and for his household and for the whole assembly of Israel. And he shall go out to the altar that is before the Lord and atone for it. And he shall take from the blood of the bull and from the blood of the goat and put it on the horns of the altar all around. And he shall sprinkle over it from the blood with his finger 7 times, and cleanse it and consecrate it from the uncleanness of the Israelites. And when they finish his atoning for the sacred zone and for the tent of meeting and for the altar, he shall bring forward the live goat. And Aaron shall lay his 2 hands on the head of the live goat and confess over it all the transgressions of the Israelites and all their sins, according to all their offenses. And he shall put them on the head of the goat and send it off in the hand of a man for the hour of the wilderness. And the goat shall bear upon it all their transgressions to a remote region. And he shall send off the goat to the wilderness. And Aaron shall come into the tent of meeting and take off the linen garments that he wore when he came into the sacred zone, and lay them down there. And he shall bathe his body in water in a holy place, and put on his garments, and come out and do his burnt offering and the people's burnt offering. And he shall atone for himself and for the people. And the fat of the offense offering he shall turn to smoke on the altar. And he who sent off the goat to Azazel shall launder his garments and bathe his body in water, and after he may come into the camp, an offense offering bull and the offense offering goat, whose blood has been brought to atone in the sacred zone, shall be taken out beyond the camp, and they shall burn their hides in fire and in flesh and in dung. And he who burns them shall launder his garments and bathe his body in water, and after he may come into the camp. And it shall be perpetual statute for you. In the 7th month, on the 7th of the month, you shall afflict yourselves, and no task shall you do, the native and the sojourner who sojourns in your midst, for on this day it will be atoned for you. To cleanse you of all your offenses before the Lord you shall be cleansed. It is a Sabbath for you, and you shall afflict yourselves an everlasting statute. And the priest shall atone, who will be anointed and who will be installed to serve as priest in his father's stead. And he shall put on the linen garments, the sacred garments, and he shall atone for the holy sanctuary and for the tent of meeting, and he shall atone for the altar and for the priests and for all the assembled people he shall atone. And this shall be an everlasting statute for you to atone for the Israelites for all their offenses once in a year. And he did as the Lord had charged Moses. Chapter 17. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to Aaron and to his sons and to all the Israelites, and you shall say to them, This is the thing that the Lord has charged, saying, Every man of the house of Israel who slaughters a bull or a sheep or a goat in the camp, or who slaughters outside the camp and does not bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting to bring it forward as an offering to the Lord before the Lord's tabernacle, it shall be counting as blood for that man. He has spilled blood, and that man shall be cut off from the midst of his people, so that the Israelites will bring their sacrifices which they sacrifice across the open field and bring them to the Lord, to the entrance of the tent of meeting, to the priest, and they shall sacrifice them as communion sacrifices to the Lord. And the priest shall cast the blood on the Lord's altar before the entrance of the tent of meeting, and turn the fat to smoke as a fragrant odor to the Lord. And they shall no longer sacrifice their sacrifices to the goat demons, after which they go whoring. An everlasting statute shall this be for them for their generations. And to them you shall say, Every man of the house of Israel and of the sojourner who sojourns in their midst, who offers up a burnt offering or a sacrifice, and does not bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting to do it for the Lord, that man shall be cut off from his kin. And every man of the house of Israel and of the sojourner who sojourns in their midst, who consumes any blood, I shall set my face against the living person who consumes blood, and cut him off from the midst of his people. For the life of the flesh is in the blood. And as for me, I have given it to you on the altar to ransom your lives, for it is the blood that ransoms in exchange for life. Therefore have I said to the Israelites, No living person among you shall consume blood, nor shall be a sojourner who sojourns in your midst be consumed blood. And every man of the Israelites and the sojourner who sojourns in the midst, who hunts down prey, beast, or fowl that may be eaten, he shall spill out its blood and cover it with earth. For the life of all flesh, its blood is in its life. And I say to the Israelites, The blood of all flesh you shall not consume, for the life of all their flesh is its blood. All who consume it shall be cut off. And any living person who eats animal that has died or been torn by predators, whether native or sojourner, shall launder his garments and bathe in water and be unclean until evening, and then be clean. And if he does not launder nor bathe his body, he shall bear his punishment.